The harsh winds of Cora 7 howled across the rocky terrain, whipping dust against the reinforced research station's transparent walls. Dr. Yoon Park stood motionless, her dark eyes fixed on the unusual readings flickering across her monitoring screens. Something was different tonight. A massive shadow crashed against the station's outer perimeter, triggering the security systems. Alarms blared, cutting through the quiet of the night research cycle, and grabbed her protective gear and emergency medical kit, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. The creature lying just outside was unlike anything she had ever encountered. A predator, easily 3 meters long, covered in iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Its breathing was labored, each breath creating a rasping sound that seemed to echo pain and desperation. Yoon approached carefully. Alien predators on Cora 7 were known for their territorial aggression and deadly hunting capabilities. This one, however, appeared wounded. Multiple deep gashes across its muscular body suggested a violent encounter with something even more dangerous in the planet's complex ecosystem. As she moved closer, the creature's eyes locked onto her. They were not the mindless, predatory eyes she expected. These eyes held intelligence, a depth of understanding that seemed almost intentional. Something was different about this encounter. The predator made a low, complex sound, not a growl, but a series of modulated tones that seemed almost like communication. Behind it, partially hidden in a rocky crevice, Yoon noticed 2 smaller forms. Cubs, vulnerable, alone. Her handheld scanner revealed critical information. The adult predator was dying. Its internal systems were failing, massive trauma evident in its biological readings. Yet its focus remained not on its own survival, but on the 2 small creatures hidden nearby. In a moment that would later be described as unprecedented in xenobiological research, the predator did something extraordinary. It nudged something towards Yoon, a small bioorganic device that seemed to pulse with a soft rhythmic light. A communication beacon, a transfer of responsibility. The cubs were unlike any young predators Yoon had studied. Their scales shimmered, with a strange bioluminescent quality, and they watched her with an awareness that seemed far beyond typical animal behavior. They made no sound, no movement to attack or flee. They simply watched. Jae Kim, the station's senior researcher, appeared behind her. "We need to make a decision," he said quietly. "Protocol suggests immediate containment or elimination of potential threat species." But Yoon knew this was different. The dying predator's eyes held a message. A plea. A trust that transcended the typical predator-prey dynamics they understood. "We're going to keep them safe," Yoon said, her voice firm and clear. Within hours, the adult predator had died. The research station became a makeshift nursery for 2 of the most mysterious young creatures ever encountered in interstellar exploration. Specialized environmental chambers were quickly prepared, nutrient solutions developed, and round-the-clock monitoring established. The cubs showed no fear, no aggression, just a calm, almost philosophical observation of their new environment. They seemed to study Yoon and the other researchers as much as the researchers studied them. Biological scans revealed complex neural networks that defied current scientific understanding. These were not simple animals, they were something more, something that suggested a level of intelligence and adaptation that could potentially revolutionize everything humans knew about alien life. As the first solar cycle of Cora 7 began to break across the station's windows, casting a deep green light across the research area, Yoon Park realized they were at the beginning of something extraordinary. The dying predator's choice was no accident. This was the start of a story that would change everything. 2 small creatures, a dying parent, a human researcher, an entire galaxy of possibilities waiting to unfold. The research station hummed with quiet anticipation, the cubs sleeping peacefully, watched over by humans who were about to discover that trust could exist in the most unexpected places. The cubs grew quickly, their bodies adapting to the controlled environment of the research station with remarkable speed. Dr. Yoon Park watched them carefully, noting how they moved with a grace that seemed impossible for their young age. Each day brought new surprises. Hyun Choi, the research assistant, discovered the first truly unusual thing about the cubs. During a routine feeding, one of the cubs solved a complex spatial puzzle designed to test problem-solving skills. It wasn't just luck. The creature deliberately manipulated the objects, showing a level of intelligence that made the researchers pause. Communication became the next challenge. The cubs responded to sounds and visual cues in ways that suggested they were learning faster than any known species. They didn't just observe, they analyzed. When Yoon dropped a small object, one of the cubs would not only watch its fall, but seem to calculate its trajectory with uncanny precision. Feeding times were particularly interesting. The specialized nutrient solutions developed by the research team were quickly modified as the cubs showed distinct preferences. They seemed to communicate with each other through a complex series of color changes in their scales and subtle body movements that looked almost like a language. One night during a routine monitoring session, something unexpected happened. The station experienced a minor power fluctuation, a common occurrence in remote research facilities. While the human staff prepared for potential system failures, the cubs did something extraordinary. They worked together to manipulate a small panel near their containment area, seemingly attempting to stabilize the station's systems. Yoon realized these were not just animals. They were problem solvers, intelligent beings with a capacity for understanding that challenged everything the research team thought they knew about alien life. The psychological evaluations became increasingly complex. The cubs showed empathy, a trait rarely observed in predatory species. When Hyun accidentally cut his hand during a research procedure, one of the cubs made a series of soft, almost concerned sounds. It was as if the creature understood pain and wanted to communicate compassion. Their physical development was equally fascinating. Each day they grew stronger, more coordinated. Their scales changed color based on their emotional state, something the researchers began to understand as a form of communication. A deep blue suggested calm. Flashes of green indicated curiosity. Rapid shifts to red signaled potential distress. The station's communication logs began to fill with increasingly bizarre reports. These were not standard research notes. These were observations of something entirely new, a species that seemed to be learning, adapting, and communicating in ways no one had predicted. Meals became a ritual of observation. The cubs would carefully examine their food, sometimes playing with it before eating. They showed preferences, personalities. One was more cautious, always watching. The other was bold, quick to explore and experiment. During one particularly memorable evening, the station's senior researcher noticed something even more unusual. The cubs were teaching each other. One would demonstrate a skill, manipulating an object, understanding a complex spatial relationship, and the other would quickly learn and adapt. The isolation of the research station became both a challenge and an opportunity. Cut off from the rest of the research community, Yoon and her team were free to observe without immediate external interference. They were witnessing something profound, the early stages of understanding an entirely new form of intelligent life. As weeks passed, the cubs grew larger. Their initial vulnerability transformed into a quiet strength. They moved with purpose, watched with intelligence, and continued to surprise the research team at every turn. Yun often joked that they were raising the most unusual children in the known universe. But the joke carried a deeper truth. These were not just specimens. They were beings with potential, with a capacity for understanding that challenged everything humans thought they knew about intelligence. The research station hummed with quiet excitement. Something extraordinary was happening. Two alien cubs, saved by a moment of unexpected trust, were showing the universe that intelligence could take forms no one had ever imagined. The diplomatic shuttle arrived without warning, cutting through Cora 7's dense atmosphere like a silver blade. Its design was unlike anything humans had seen before, sleek, organic, almost alive. Dr. Yoon Park watched from the research station's main observation deck, her heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Wu Li, the assigned diplomatic representative, stood beside her. His hands were steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. The alien civilization they were about to meet was not known for peaceful negotiations. The first representative emerged from the shuttle, tall, covered in scaled armor that shifted colors like living metal. The alien moved with a predatory grace. Its eyes, multiple and arranged in a complex pattern, scanned the research station with calculated precision. "We have come for the cubs," the alien representative spoke, its voice a complex series of clicks and harmonics translated through advanced communication devices. Yoon stepped forward. Behind her, the cubs watched the interaction with an unsettling calm. They seemed to understand something was happening, something important. The diplomatic discussion was tense. The alien civilization believed the cubs were part of a critical genetic lineage, a species so rare that their survival meant everything to their culture. They had not expected humans to be their caretakers. They had certainly not expected the cubs to be thriving. Genetic scans revealed something extraordinary. The cubs were not just survivors. They were something more. Their DNA showed remarkable adaptations, a complexity that suggested they were evolving in ways no one could predict. "Humans are not suitable guardians," the alien representative stated. Its multiple eyes focused on Yoon with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. But the cubs had other plans. During the tense negotiations, one of them approached the alien representative. Instead of showing fear or aggression, it demonstrated a series of complex problem-solving tasks. It manipulated advanced technological devices, showed understanding of spatial relationships that exceeded expected capabilities. The alien's color pattern shifted. What looked like surprise, if such an emotion could be translated across species, rippled across its scaled surface. Wu Li understood the significance of the moment. This was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was a first contact scenario that could change everything humans understood about alien intelligence. The station's research logs became a battlefield of information. Each scan, each observation, became a piece of evidence. The cubs were not just animals. They were intelligent beings with potential that crossed traditional biological boundaries. Days of negotiations followed. The alien civilization demanded the cubs' return. The human research team presented their findings. Each side brought complex arguments, scientific data, cultural perspectives that seemed impossible to bridge. But the cubs remained the center of attention. They watched. They learned. They adapted. One evening, during a particularly tense moment, the cubs did something unexpected. They began to communicate, not just with each other, but with both humans and the alien representatives. A complex series of color changes, body movements, and subtle sound frequencies that suggested a language far more advanced than anyone had imagined. The alien representative's stance changed. What had begun as a demand for immediate return transformed into something else. Curiosity, respect, a recognition that these cubs represented something more than a simple genetic lineage. Yoon realized they were witnessing a moment of true interspecies communication. Not just an exchange of information, but a genuine attempt to understand. The station became a focal point of an emerging galactic conversation. What did it mean to be intelligent? What defined life? How could different species truly communicate and understand each other? As the solar cycle of Cora 7 ended, casting long shadows across the research station, something had changed. The diplomatic tensions had not disappeared, but they had transformed. The cubs continued to watch, learning, growing, becoming something entirely new. The first signs came quietly, a series of unexplained communication disruptions across multiple star systems. Strategic analyst Min Kim noticed the patterns first, subtle breaks in interstellar communication networks that most would have overlooked. Dr. Yoon Park's research station received the initial data fragments. The cubs seemed unusually agitated, their scales flickering with rapid color changes that suggested deep understanding. They were responding to information humans couldn't yet comprehend. Min arrived at the research station with encrypted data packages that made no sense to conventional analysis. Star systems were going dark, Not destroyed, not attacked, simply disappearing. Communication networks would suddenly show blank spaces where entire civilizations had existed moments before. The Cubs began to demonstrate something extraordinary. When presented with the complex data patterns, they could reconstruct communication sequences that had been completely scrambled. It was as if they could see through the chaos, understanding a language of destruction that humans couldn't even perceive. Genetic scans revealed something terrifying. The Cub's biological structure contained unique adaptive capabilities that seemed designed to resist whatever was causing these systematic eliminations. Their DNA wasn't just genetic code, it was a complex defensive mechanism. The alien diplomatic representatives who had previously argued about the Cubs' custody now sat in silent horror. What they had considered a simple genetic lineage was actually a potential key to survival for multiple species. Interstellar research consortiums began to converge on the small research station. What had started as a simple xenobiological study was transforming into humanity's potential first line of defense against an unknown galactic threat. The Cubs demonstrated abilities that defied scientific understanding. They could analyze complex communication disruption patterns faster than any known computer system. When presented with fragmented data about disappearing civilizations, they would reconstruct entire communication networks with frightening precision. Min discovered the first concrete evidence. The galactic threat wasn't a single entity. It was a systematic process of communication disruption that targeted specific evolutionary lines. Civilizations with complex adaptive capabilities were being selectively removed from existence. They're not destroying, Min explained during a critical briefing. They're filtering, selecting, removing specific types of intelligent life. The research station became a fortress of information. Every scan, every observation of the Cubs provided new insights. Their unique biological structure suggested they were not just survivors, but a potential weapon against this unknown threat. Diplomatic channels across multiple star systems opened. Civilizations that had previously been in conflict now found themselves united by a common understanding. Something was hunting intelligent life, and these two alien Cubs, raised by humans, might be the key to understanding why. The Cubs themselves seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Their behavior changed. No longer were they simply research subjects. They were active participants providing complex insights through their unique method of communication, a blend of color changes, subtle body movements, and neural pattern transmissions. One evening, during a critical analysis session, one of the Cubs created a three-dimensional communication pattern that mapped out potential threat vectors across multiple star systems. The visualization was so complex, so precise, that it left the research team speechless. Min realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. These Cubs were not just providing information. They were actively developing strategies of resistance against a threat that had been systematically eliminating advanced civilizations. The research station became the most important location in known space. Researchers, diplomats, and strategic analysts from countless civilizations began to converge, united by a single goal: understanding the threat and finding a way to resist. Yoon Park stood at the center of this emerging storm. The two Cubs that had once been vulnerable orphans were now potentially the most important beings in the galaxy. Their survival was no longer just a scientific curiosity. It was a matter of species-wide existence. As the solar cycle of Cora 7 ended, casting long shadows across the research station, something fundamental had changed. Humanity was no longer just an observer in the galaxy. They had become a critical line of defense. The Galactic Conference Hall was unlike anything humans had seen before. Floating platforms suspended in a vast, transparent space that looked more like a living organism than a traditional meeting place. Dr. Yoon Park stood at the center, surrounded by representatives from civilizations that had once been bitter enemies. The Cubs, now fully grown, were no longer simple research subjects. They had transformed into something extraordinary. Their bodies had developed capabilities that blended biological intelligence with something that seemed almost technological. Scales that could process complex data, neural networks that could communicate across vast distances. Each representative carried the weight of their civilization's survival. The systematic threat that had been eliminating advanced species had been challenged, and these two beings, raised by humans, were the key to understanding everything. One of the cubs stepped forward. Its movement was fluid, almost musical. Colors rippled across its body, creating complex communication patterns that simultaneously translated into multiple languages. It was speaking to every civilization at once, a universal communication that transcended traditional barriers. The story was complex. The galactic threat was not a simple enemy. It was a system designed to control evolutionary paths. Civilizations that showed too much adaptive potential were systematically removed. But these cubs, with their unique human-influenced development, had found a way to resist. Min Kim presented the final research findings. The cubs were more than survivors. They were a new form of intelligent life. Their genetic structure showed how different species could combine, adapt, and create something entirely new. Humanity's role of nurturing and protection had been crucial. Representatives from predatory species that had once viewed humans as potential prey now looked with something close to respect. These cubs represented a new understanding of intelligence, not just survival, not just adaptation, but a complex ability to understand and transform. The conference wasn't just a meeting, it was a turning point for galactic civilization. One of the cubs demonstrated their capabilities. With a simple gesture, it reconstructed communication networks that had been destroyed across multiple star systems. Complex data streams became visible, showing how intelligent life could resist systematic elimination. Yoon realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. These cubs were not just survivors. They were architects of a new type of galactic cooperation. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were now listening to each other. The transformation was subtle but profound. The cubs showed how different species could communicate, how trust could be built, how survival wasn't about strength, but about understanding. Diplomatic channels that had been closed for centuries began to open. The research station on Cora 7 was no longer just a scientific outpost. It had become a symbol of hope, a place where the impossible had become possible. As the conference concluded, something remarkable happened. The cubs chose to continue working with multiple civilizations. They were not bound to a single species. They were something new, something that could bridge gaps that seemed impossible to cross. Min watched as the representatives began to develop new communication protocols. Protocols based on the cubs' unique abilities. Protocols that suggested a future where different species could truly understand each other. The human research team that had started this journey were now considered pioneers. They had done something unprecedented. They had raised 2 alien cubs, and in doing so, had changed the course of galactic civilization. Yoon Park looked at the cubs, no longer small creatures she had first discovered, but complex beings that represented a new hope for intelligent life. They were a testament to the power of trust, the power of understanding, the power of seeing beyond traditional boundaries. As the galactic conference hall began to dissolve, returning to its fluid living state, one thing became clear. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. A new chapter in the story of intelligent life was just starting. And humans, once considered a young, insignificant species, were at the center of it all.